All right, Dobadan, ladies and gentlemen. Today I am joined by Mary Ann Hennessey, head of the Division for Democratic Innovations out of the Strasbourg office, formerly Sarajevo office. For those that don't know about you, give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got into your line of work.
Okay. Background about myself, academic background, political science, languages, European history background. Long story short, I was finishing up a degree in political science in the United States in 1989, and Europe changed. And it was very exciting. And the whole idea of being a part of democracy on the move, of human rights conquering the world, and that's what it felt like at the time, brought me to Europe and pretty quickly into the Council of Europe. So in terms of background, I've been with the Council of Europe since 1990, working on different things, on education and higher education reform for a long time, political affairs, Balkan desk, then Sarajevo for 5 years, and then I've been back for about 5 years in Strasbourg at the headquarters of the Council of Europe, working on civil society and democratic innovation and the World Forum for Democracy. Maybe I should say something about what the Council of Europe actually is, because it's spent the biggest part of my life actually working with this organization and living here. And I hope that people who follow you have some idea about European institutions, but the Council of Europe is the oldest pan-European intergovernmental organization. It was set up in 1949. So the European Convention for Human Rights, the European Court for Human Rights, these were created as part of the Council of Europe. Today, there are 47 member states, including Bosnia and Herzegovina. It represents Europe that really stretches from Iceland to Vladivostok, focusing on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. So it's an organization that doesn't deal with military and security issues, doesn't directly deal with economic issues either, although there are aspects of that. So there you go. So it's an organization that basically allowed me to partly, if I wouldn't say live that dream, but at least work towards that dream of being a part of empowering of people through democracy, human rights, and the rule of law.
So there's, if I'm correct, there's no direct connection with the Council of Europe and the EU.
No, there's a huge amount of partnership and coordination and so on. But the EU, which is now 27 member states, grew out of the coal and steel association and started off as very much an economic union, economic community, and then from the 90s when also the EU started to enlarge after the changes in Europe, started to incorporate more of a democracy, human rights, rule of law. Well, sometimes we call that conditionality, but anyway, principles into the foundation of its work, which were borrowed very much from those established by the Council of Europe over those many, many years after the war, World War II. I mean.
So what is your position exactly? What is it that what some of your responsibilities?
Well, my job now, so I work within the Directorate General of Democracy, and my job is to foster civil society participation in the work of the Council of Europe, also to coordinate and support the Council of Europe, working to promote freedom of association, so the rights of people to organize and associate together in NGOs and other kinds of associations, to be involved in political life. We actually have a body within the Council of Europe called the Conference of International NGOs. And so my team provides a sort of secretariat support for that body to meet and do its work. We also organize the World Forum for Democracy, which is a global event. It's supposed to be every year. Obviously, pandemic complicated things a little bit. Where, for the most part, we bring together policymakers and grassroots activists to look at current and emerging challenges to democracy and innovative solutions, whether they be at local level or they can be national or international level, with a different sort of thematic approach every year. And that's quite a huge event that takes place in Strasbourg in the first half of November every year.
Have you been following, the recent tensions going on in Bosnia and Herzegovina right now?
To some extent, yes. I mean, obviously, one of the main differences between my job when I was in Sarajevo, which was really focused on Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I was able for 5 years to focus on all of the different instruments, legal tools, types of activities and standards that the Council of Europe has across, from preventing doping and racism in sport to preventing torture and improving local government, constitutional reform, all of those things in one single country. So now I'm dealing with just sort of one topic, but across all 47, and in some cases on a global scale. So I can't follow it as intensely as I once did. I mean, in Sarajevo, I started every single day by reading between 4 to 6 newspapers, local newspapers. So I'm obviously not doing that at this point in time. But yeah, I am following it, and it makes me very sad. Angry as well, but I mean, sad primarily. At the same time, it's part of a larger trend of what I would call, polarization and escalation of existential threats, for no reason, for no good reason, that are happening across in Europe and in North America and other places as well, but that I'm less familiar with. So
I was speaking to a friend in Sarajevo the other day, and he seemed to be very like worried, essentially, of another war breaking out relatively soon. I don't know. I'm not obviously I'm not an expert in geopolitics or whatever, but I just I don't know.
no, you get that. You definitely get that sense of angst and worry, and people feeling threatened. And on top of it, I mean, let's face it, nobody, I mean, most people didn't think anything would happen before, and it sure did. And so I absolutely get that. And what I would love to see is a lot more serious attention by the international community partners of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that this is not just a politics game between a very small number of people vying for influence, power, or territory or opportunity for self-aggrandizement. It has real impact on real people, and people, let's go a step further, who have never really been able to fully recover, I mean, emotionally, economically, politically, culturally, whichever way, from the violence in the 90s. So the international community, especially the organizations and my own organization, I would say also, even if it's less powerful and influential than some of the other ones, but I would love to see taking it more seriously and actually being less equivocal about things.
If you look at the last the conflict in the 90s, I mean, why do you think, in your opinion, why do you think it is that the international community didn't act quicker?
Um, I mean, I don't know how cynical I want to be right now, but look at the situation right now. People are looking at Russia and Ukraine. Bosnia is still not going to rate that high on the international community attention meter. And as long as you have people and organizations or intellectuals supporting the ethnic tensions narrative, it's very easy to say, okay, that they have a problem. Let's tell them that they should work it out, right? I mean, just by way of example, you don't see the international media or international politicians saying, well, oh, Russia and Ukraine have some ancient interethnic issues that they just need to work out. This is a power play. So you have to deal with it as a power play. The war in the 90s was also not about ethnic issues. It was a power play. It still is today. But for some reason, it's just not, I guess the countries or the politicians internationally that could do something about it are just not going to put it that high on a priority list. And I think Bosnian people know that very well. The people in the region know that very well. And that's, I think, the main contributing factor to, people's sense of insecurity and worry.
What are, if any, are some difficulties you would say you had while you were working in Sarajevo?
Well, I was there for 5 years. So, it's looking back on it now, I'd say the main difficulty was partly with myself. That is to say, being naive enough to think that when you explain things to people and demonstrate that whether this is what they have to do because it's a legal obligation, because it's an international treaty obligation, because it's the right thing to do, it's the moral thing to do, it would be beneficial to everyone, including themselves, economically, politically, whatever, that when you explain that and get that, that more or less that's what they will do. And when that doesn't happen and you go around again, the politics changes slightly after elections and you start all over again. And so, after 5 years, I guess, having been around that circle many times, realizing that, there's too many other things at play, and that actually not enough people, and I don't mean people in Bosnia-Herzegovina citizens, I mean people in politics in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and or maybe people in business, I don't really know, are simply not working on that same paradigm. Their interests are different. And you could say politics in every country, has a different set of incentives and disincentives that are not necessarily about just what's the right thing or the best thing to do. But most functional political systems have enough of a disincentive or enough of incentive to do things which maybe partly self-serving for the politician, but actually are what they are required to do or needed to do to get, enough of success, whether, things like unemployment rates, things like GDP, or things like, different international rankings or something can have an impact. And those incentives and disincentives just don't work in Bosnia and Herzegovina because it's just not a normal democratic political system that's working there.
Right. Yeah, that's what.
So again, that was very quick. I mean, it usually always is going to happen, but we very quickly got back to the fundamental question, which is that the Constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina doesn't work and is not going to work. So it always sort of comes eventually down to that issue, doesn't it?
Yeah, because that was one of the things that struck me, like when I was even just doing regular things like paperwork for jobs and stuff. First of all, like how bureaucratic everything is. Just like everything needs a stamp, and
or just when you want to pay your electricity bill or something like yeah.
Like I remember when I was teaching at Birch University. Like I did the first. Like they were just like come in, and I'm like, so what am I going to do for the work permit? They were like, oh, we're not really sure. Go to this office, and I went to the office, and they told me what I needed to do, and then I got all the paperwork that they asked me for, and then I handed it into the office, and the guy said, "Where's the stamp?" And I said, like, "What stamp?" He's like, "You need a stamp from your university," and I was like, "But like this is the documents." He's like, "No." So I remember going, "Okay." I went back to London. I went back to my university, which the campus has moved now, even. And I haven't seen my professor for like, I think like probably around 10 years up until that point. I knocked on his door and he just opened the door and he was just staring at me. He was like, "Nick, is that you?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I need the stamp." So what do you need a stamp for? I was like, "Oh, I'm teaching in this university."
But look, that's a Central European thing. That's not just a Bosnian thing.
Okay.
So I get you because I also, I guess I come from that Anglo-Irish American culture where, a document which is dated and signed and is a document. But in Central Europe, there must be a stempel, to make it official. And so, I was going to say that's not just a Bosnian thing, but at the same time, those things haven't been modernized because what's the public service, for example, for in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Is it, it's not for fixing roads and water supply and collecting trash or whatever the public service you think is supposed to be for. It's for providing patronage, jobs, things that can maintain the feudal lords in their position, or whether it be parties or people, so, your expectations and your outcomes are going to be different accordingly. And it's honestly, I mean, Sarajevo is I was looking at some of the points you sent me before. I mean, Sarajevo is a great place to live, right? I don't think we know too many people who've lived there who said that they didn't like it and they wouldn't want to go back, And one of the worst things about it, though, is when you watch people that that you care about, that you admire, that you like, who are so smart and so capable, struggling just to do ordinary things in life, like graduate from the university, get a job, have opportunities, get an apartment, do any of the sort of regular stuff, because it's complicated by all of these unnecessary difficulties. And that's sad. And then, of course, behind that, you just see all the people leaving and you think, what a damn shame. And that's tough because it's, it's a great place and there's great people living there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. You know the thing, like, I guess, like why I even, like, for example, brought up the whole thing with the stamps. If it is like a Central Europe thing, then fair enough. But, like, for example, when I was thinking about taking up this position in a NGO in Belgrade, and we are going through the paperwork process there, and I looked at the process and I'm like, okay, I recognize this. This is exactly like what happens in Sarajevo. The difference being, though, was as much as they were asking for the stamps or whatever, it was getting done. Like, it seemed
Yeah.
to be getting done fairly smoothly. It was a long process, but it was getting done. Whereas in Sarajevo, it was always something. There was always,
Yep.
oh no, you got to do this thing
You have to
again.
go back to that one,
Yeah.
bring it back here.
And I don't
well, I mean, I just refer you back to my previous point, which is what's the yeah. And yeah, and yeah, you have to admire a little bit. I mean, systems that actually get stuff done is also, has a lot to be said for it. And there are systems that even can be a little bit corrupted, but are still effective. You can be having a system that is just giving out jobs to party members, family members, or whatever, but still works. It's not really ethical, but it can still work, right? And there are a lot of things that do work. I mean, it's hard to say, but the point is that people are functioning in a system, and the system isn't having as its objective to be a democratic system that allows a voice to all citizens and provides services to all citizens. That's not the objective of a system.
Right. What would your advice be to somebody who's, like, preparing to like move to Sarajevo and work there and live there?
Do you mean someone like myself, or like an international person who's going to go? Yeah. Okay. Well, my personal advice would be just don't be an expat.
Don't be. All right.
I mean, just go live there, work there, and live. No, I mean, just don't be an expat. I mean, which is not to say, I mean, that people in the international community are also lovely people, and I met great friends. But depending on what your job is, I mean, I guess that's the same everywhere. But since there are quite a lot of international people still in Bosnia and Herzegovina, could be pretty easy to just get limited to that sort of circle of people, and that's sad. That's kind of old-fashioned and limiting, because the great thing about Sarajevo is Sarajevans. And the places. I mean, another great thing I would say is just enjoy the bands playing in bars. I mean, if that's happening now, I don't know, but when it does, that's just, I don't know how many other cities. I mean, I haven't lived in hundreds of cities in my life, but I've never seen such a great sort of local fun music scene as Sarajevo. Good music.
Yeah, this is like one of the things, because, like, people, I remember my first stint in Sarajevo, people were like, what are you doing here? You're from London, why would you be here? I don't know. It's I mean, I can see it obviously from, like, people who grew up there and born there, and obviously me being a foreigner, I just obviously certain things I don't have to face necessarily. So I get that, but I don't know. For me, like, first of all, for me, Sarajevo is like a perfect balance between, like, feeling like a city but also feeling like a town.
Yeah, absolutely. I
You know?
I think that was fantastic. Just also, you can seize it. It's not so big, but it's still a capital city. It's
Right.
got a vibrancy of things going on, and but yet you can walk most of the time or catch a taxi without too much problem, and go all over the place. I and be and obviously very quickly be out in nature.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's an excellent combination of things, and the best coffee in the world.
Yeah. I didn't actually drink coffee that much until I went to Sarajevo because
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it was
And I don't know. I mean, I haven't been back in a while, so I've had to readapt to second best kind of coffee, but it's hard. I, I miss it a lot.
I saw a post you made recently with the Dubiozo Collective.
Ah,
How
yes.
did that come about?
How did that?
How did that come about? Like, how did you organize that?
Um, how did it come about? Well, I got in touch with, and here again, um, luckily, I wanted them to participate. Um, so this happened in November. So I guess November 21. So probably around April, I tried to see how I could get in touch. And luckily, I remembered some people back in Sarajevo who I knew were friends. So I had met one of the guys once at a party. So I remembered who had held that party, and I was just trying to find different uh, connections. So I did eventually did get last spring in touch with their manager, and had a very long process, obviously, between the pandemic, between the very small budget that I was working with, and even if they are incredibly generous, you know, um, I can't say enough about Dubiosa Collective. I mean, they are people with real conviction and huge hearts. Um, and but obviously, I don't want to be a burden on that, so I had to cover. I mean, and this for me was a huge learning experience because I'm no band promoter, I'm no tour organizer, I'm no concert organizer. So their manager is an absolutely lovely woman who was so patient with me. um you know and honestly, so God, this almost sounds like I'm talking about a Tinder date or something. I mean, there were a couple of times where we just said, okay, it's not going to work out. Let's just leave it. And then, but I still wanted it so much. I came back, and try another thing. Um, and so, yeah, ultimately it was really an issue about whether I would be able to just have the infrastructure available for them to play and to so we did manage to work it out, and they actually came. They played a concert here in the city at a pretty nice venue, which was amazing. Although, well, I don't know, amazing, definitely, but the very morning of that concert, so that was probably the um 8th or the 9th of November, the French government announced new, stricter COVID measures. So a lot of people didn't come to the concert because, yeah, they just, and it was scary. Like, it was the Omicron, and they said, okay, there's these limitations that you have to wear a mask there. But so, So, I mean, with Dubiosa Collective, it's always good if you have kind of enough room to dance. So
Right.
that was great. And then the next day, they performed at the closing session of our World Forum for Democracy. And it was absolutely fantastic. They played 3 songs, I think, made everybody laugh, dance, jump around, and feel extremely positive, even though we were talking for 3 days about, um, you know, what can democracy do about the climate crisis? Is democracy the system that's going to actually help us get somewhere on climate change? So it was, fairly depressing overall as an issue to talk about, because we still are living in a world where, democracies are struggling to keep people dedicated to that idea of democracy, where climate change talks at that, COP, we're on 26, going on 27, keep talking, but things, keep changing, and the climate is getting worse, and temperatures are rising, and so on and so on. And so, and yet in all of that, and I think this is where Dubiosa Collective are so really, really special, because they tap into a whole stream of optimism, which is charged politically. It's about activism. The songs they sing are not about, for the most part, not about just sit around and, let life happen to you. It's about doing something. And so they managed to send off all these hundreds and hundreds of people, and apparently millions who watched it online, back into the world with a lot of energy and optimism. So I can't say enough great about the Dubiosa Collective.
Yeah, because I didn't actually know about Dubiosa until I was living in Sarajevo, and then
Sure.
when I was teaching in Poland for a few months in 2015, like a little tiny English school. And my teacher, who I was working with there, I just walked into the classroom one day, and she was playing Dubiosa, and she's from Portugal.
Ah.
And I was like, "Oh, that's that Dubiosa Collective." She's like, "Yeah, I love this band." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Look, they tour the world. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And I get it. It's extremely appealing, I think, everywhere. It's just a good vibe, man.
You mentioned a phrase actually that got me thinking about something that people always saying. Well, actually, I remember first time coming to Saudi, probably my first or second week there. I had this like I had this perception of there being more people in the city than there actually are, because it was
Mm-hmm.
like in the middle of summer, everybody was out drinking coffee. And I'm like, wow. And then when winter came, it was obviously a bit less. And so I know you wake up in the morning and you see some guys drinking coffee at the table, and you're going home in the evening, and the same guys are there drinking. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And I know there's people. I don't like. I personally, for example, I personally think, like, I always hear a lot of people sometimes in Bosnia saying, "Oh, people here are lazy and whatever." But I look at it like from a different perspective, because especially when I look at the diaspora community, like, I think Bosnians are like really hardworking. Like
Mm-hmm.
from my perception, yeah, there can be this perception of laziness or something, but I don't know if you would
I
agree
think
with me.
that you made a big point, because in the diaspora, their hard work could get them somewhere.
Right, exactly. So that's why I'm always thinking, is it laziness, or is it just people being demotivated because of like the situation, politically, and you know, like what do I?
Look, I mean, obviously we can't generalize. And there are plenty of, I mean, I have watched people in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, make something out of nothing,
Exactly.
out of absolutely nothing. So we can't generalize, but I've also watched people, and I totally get it, just lose faith
Right.
in, I mean, I guess in everything except for, you know, your family, community, and give up on, I mean, so, I mean, you can see that, you don't only see that in Bosnia, obviously, that's, but the fact that it's so unnecessary and so widespread is painful. It doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't. It's like that because of so many failures of international intervention, of you know, the Constitution, of checks and balances, of accountability mechanisms. Also, to some extent, I mean, the inability. No, I shouldn't say it that way. The fact that when there are, and I still have in my head, you know, the protests. Was it 2014, 12, or 13?
2013. But yeah.
You know, even when there are sort of movements of from, you know, grassroots, from citizens, that, you know, something's got to change, and you can see it starting to coalesce. The fact that the vested interests of political parties manage to, you know, break it apart back into, you know, the boxes, the ethnic boxes that we want to see people in, is, and I don't blame anybody. I mean, I don't know how you overcome that except through, you know, really long and hard struggle. And I look at, you know, my personal history. I say my personal history with the civil rights movement in the United States. I'm not that old, but I was actually born because of it. Because my parents met each other when they went as civil rights workers into the South of the United States. And so, yeah, that long struggle. But then here we are in 2022, and many of the really basic premises that you may have thought were acquired, or, you know, take for granted as a result of that civil rights struggle, are still in question, still being rolled back, pushed back. So, you know, I wouldn't, you know, you can't blame, for example, you know, Bosnian people for not overcoming,
Right.
you know, because everything is being put in the way of overcoming that. And yeah, but it's still sad, I guess, or disappointing.
You were born in United States, right?
Mm-hmm. In Louisiana.
In Louisiana, and so are your heritage are your grandparents Irish, or your parents, like, were they born in Ireland, or?
They're all Irish. Yeah. My father's family, from a few generations back. I mean, obviously the family trees get complicated, but my mom's side of the family, born in Ireland. Father's side, a few generations, famine, basically, emigration to Ireland, or some a bit later, but basically around then. So, and I'm an Irish citizen since 1990.
Oh, okay. So I went to school in Ireland for 5 years in Kildare,
Mm-hmm.
and I know first of all it's way more laid back than most places in the UK. I don't know, and I remember first time coming to Bosnia, I had a similar similar feeling in the sense of just like how laid back it is, how the hospitality I got when I
Mm-hmm.
first arrived in Bosnia, the same as in Ireland. Um, like how often do you go back to Ireland? How often you go?
Pretty frequently. I mean, I was going there maybe twice a year with when my father was still alive, taking him to see the places that he wanted to see and so on. But now, actually, very shortly after he passed away, I had that. And I think that happens maybe when you don't have parents anymore, and you suddenly think, okay, now I'm on the front line of mortality in terms of the generations. Um, why am I not doing the thing that I wanted to do? Like I had found so many reasons, too expensive or this or that. So I don't know. I had that moment, and I bought my little place on the west coast of Ireland, which is a really major fixture upper. But it's where I want to be, looking at the ocean. So I go there every couple of months now, and I have a lot of work to do. I spend my vacations doing hard labor. No.
So, would you say that what Ireland is like a perfect place to retire, or?
Well, I don't know because, retire, yeah, in the sense of if you want to spend your retirement hiking, working on archaeological digs, that's me. That's my swimming in the ocean, stuff like that. Yes. At the same time, also have hopefully still will have friends in Sarajevo, so I'll spend some of the time there. You can see I'm already fantasizing about retirement. Maybe, to come back to what I said before, like when I was in Sarajevo, I felt like I was going around the same carousel of optimism, cynicism, let's try, not really getting anywhere. And that's an issue that I'm dealing with right now, which is that, like I said at the beginning, I came to Europe and this wave of, the wall came down and things are changing. I mean, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of, this whole concept of making the world a better place, making Europe a place where every individual benefits fully from, basic human rights and lives in democracy, protected by the rule of law. And that's sort of clearly not a straight line. It's having some ups and downs, and I don't like to think that it's a circular thing because I don't have the energy to start all over again. But it's hard when you see that arc is not going in the right direction all the time. So we on the other hand, now it's 2022. Maybe just like everything, there needs to be a rejuvenation. There needs to be a reminder for people why we want to live in democracy, why it's really better to live in democracy where individual human rights are guaranteed and protected, because authoritarian regimes, ethnocracies, oligarchies, all of these things do not serve the interests of the whole community, but only of segments of the community. And we're not going to individually or collectively live the lives that we want to live unless we do that in a democratic system. But you can talk and we run, you can run campaigns, activities and everything. I don't know. But this is something where I don't know. I would love to think that, you know, countries in the Balkans, for example, because they have so much youthful energy in a way, and I mean that literally from the young people, but also in terms of many of them being relatively young, newly independent countries
Yeah.
still, you know, could really show the way and really start something where people get reminded why when the Berlin Wall came down, it was a big deal, you know, and it wasn't just a big deal for big corporations, you know, but for everybody. And I know I'm talking to theoretically now, but um, yeah, I think that it would be good in Bosnia for sure, to see that sort of citizen power, but you'd first have to empower citizens, that is citizens and not just constituent people.
Right. Yeah.
But success, you know, seeing that coming out of the Balkans, I think would be a great benefit to the rest of Europe.
Like one talking of Bosnian situation, one like thing that like how much like you know about like the dynamics of the Dayton Accords. Like I mean, as far as my understanding is, it was supposed to be a temporary solution, if I'm correct, but it's
That's what
still
they like to say. I don't look. If it was supposed to be temporary, I mean, they should have made it temporary. You know, nowadays, I think people who were involved with it then, I mean, if you read all of the memoirs of the people who were in the room in Dayton or the hangar or whatever it was, um, they say things like that. They say, oh, well, we thought we would just give them a framework and then they, you know, the Bosnians would, you know, take the next steps and come up with something more functional. But they created a framework which suited the power centers that they had determined on, and gave them no incentive to improve that. It gave them no incentive to be a citizen focused democratic system. So I think, you know, the people who were in the room then were desperate simply for the international community to not look incapable of ending that war. So they ended the war, period. They didn't create a functional peace. And I think that it would be much more honest to admit that and say we need to fix that. But that's just my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody or any organization when I say that. That's just my personal opinion. I feel very strongly about it because I followed much more closely later on with Marty Ahtisaari when he was working out the Kosovo independence process anyway. And you know, obviously I know for a fact he learned lessons from what happened or didn't happen in Dayton. So he set up a process that would result in a constitution that would have a certain number of guarantees in it that the international community wanted to see about human rights, about European standards, about equal rights, things like that. But he created a process that required participation of almost all stakeholders in Kosovar society. I say almost because he really made a mistake when he didn't require a certain level of participation of women in that process. Okay. There was, you know, almost every ethnic group you could imagine, or religious community, or, you know, anything else you can imagine. It was foreseen, had to be there in the process. And again, I think he just assumed. But in parentheses, when you look at the negotiation tables, Marty Ahtisaari, we're talking about Kosovo now, the UN delegation that he led, all men. Serbia delegation, all men. Kosovo delegation, all men. So I don't know why he assumed that women would be involved in the process to any extent. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was he didn't say, here's a constitution. We could have had some experts write a constitution for Kosovo and say, if Serbia agrees to this, if Kosovo agrees to this, that's their constitution, go with it. No, he said, here's the process for how you're going to make a constitution. It's going to have this kind of things in it, and go for it. And obviously that had a much, not perfect, but had a much better outcome in terms of functionality of a political system than Bosnia. So when it became obvious, and it's not up to me to say at what point it became obvious, I know at what point it became obvious to me that the Constitution, the Dayton Constitution, just was not able to produce a functional, democratic political system that ensures equality of rights and opportunities for every individual citizen in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Then, the people who made it should have fixed it. That's, and it's never too late to do the right thing, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's definitely never too late to do the right thing. Like a lot of the actually dynamics remind me of but the politics, not just the politics, but even social things, which is probably part of the reason why I kind of adapted really quickly. But they remind me of African culture actually. A lot of things are very, very similar, and that's one of the things that kind of struck me. People are like, oh, don't you feel like you stick out here being a black guy and everything? And I'm like, yeah, okay, if you look at it in that way, but from another perspective, a lot of the social norms, I grew up within my house, so I feel really at home when I'm here in Bosnia in that sense.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I always the thing that I remember really kind of took a long time. Well, maybe not a long time, but it took me a little while to get my head around. Was the concept of ethnicity and nationality when I first went to Bosnia, because I remember sitting in a bar with somebody and I was like, look, you got to explain to me what people are telling me about the ethnic tensions, and we live in it's a multicultural society. And I guess coming from the UK was, because basically essentially in the UK, when you, not always, it depends on the context, but when people are talking about ethnicity, sometimes it becomes synonymous with race in certain times. Not always, but people often look at it
or where they don't want to say race. But at the same time, race doesn't actually exist. So, but racism does, right?
Right.
So when you're looking at Bosnia, and this is the thing, let's be honest, depending how you define, they are not different ethnicities. They are just the same people with the same language, who at a certain point in time use different names for their community, right? With different religions or whatever. So that's, again, so from that point of view, and that, they are actually, if you do DNA tests, right? And, you're, of course, we're all 99% same anyhow, but you basically have, ethnicities that aren't different from each other at all, but the ism exists. It's real, right? So you can't you can't ignore it, that those ethnicities, because the ism is real. Um, and it's hard for a lot of, I mean, one of the funniest moments for me, and I won't say any names, so I won't get in trouble, I hope. Um, you know, pretty early on, when I was trying to talk to a really important politician about the need to ensure more mixity, that's a French word, but to the need to ensure that people actually have more contact with each other across these lines, right? And his response was, we're so unique in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have such a multicultural society. And I literally had to pretend I was coughing or something to just, I just wanted to say, walk down any street. London, forget about it. Strasbourg. I mean, you're going to hear people speaking more languages, dressing in more different national, ethnic, manners, coming from so many different parts of the world, even here. I mean, in Strasbourg, you have Alsatian people, you have French people from other parts of France who have been here for generations, international people. I mean, on a Saturday, if I hear cars honking going past my house, the first thing that comes to my mind is Turkish wedding. Right? I don't think, oh, must there be a football match? Or no, it's a Turkish wedding. So for a guy in Bosnia with basically a whole bunch of white people, but who speak the same language, but some who go to mosque and some who go to church, and most who don't go to any, tell me that's so multicultural that it's really special and unique, we'd have a different way of understanding multicultural. Now, I'm not going to diminish the fact that there are different communities with different aspects to them. But the only problem is one of political power. It's not a problem of, respecting each other's religions, living together, eating food, music, literature. None of those things are issues, right? It's only about sharing of political power.
Yeah.
And I mean, multicultural is a much deeper concept than just using a few words different.
No.
That might get me in trouble.
But I kind of know where you came from, because I remember the first time somebody told me that they were from a mixed marriage. They said, and I remember going, but everybody in your family kind of looks the same. What's the mix?
Yeah, but you were in Ireland, so there what they call a mixed marriage, a Protestant and a Catholic, right?
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so it's just,
maybe not so much anymore, but.
But that's also another thing, actually, that I was having a conversation with somebody, like, in actually Ireland, like with the conflict with Southern Ireland and Northern Ireland, and even actually the UK, actually.
But there only ever was a conflict between Ireland and the UK. There was never a conflict between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
That's true.
Okay.
But even like when I look at the UK, in maybe not to the same level, but there are some similar ideas when it comes to like nationality, at least, because I mean, we got different countries under one state, like England. We all have the same passport. But the more I started reading and looking into it, I'm like, okay, the UK like system when it comes to that isn't exactly uncomplicated, but it just works somehow. people just accept it is what it is. Like you're Scottish and you're British, you're English and you're British. Like even though like I would argue that people in Scotland are Scottish first, but still, like we have.
Yeah, but a lot of the people who live in Scotland, you know, are English, are Irish, are, well, you know, that's um and they're not in any way second class citizens, right?
Right. Yeah, so I guess that's like one of the big differences, and also in terms of you said earlier about you know there are systems where you know there's corruption and whatever, but things just work. Like if I look at the UK on a like government on a local level, like local councils, the amount of like backhanded things that are going on is incredible. But for example, like when my mom passed away and I tried to get, which I eventually did, to get her tenancy, the tenancy of her apartment passed on to me because it was government housing. I thought, okay, simple. I'm just gonna, you know, send in the death certificate, and you know, I have proof that you know I grew up in this house, and it's gonna be simple. It was like over like so. It was over a year. I wouldn't say it was 2 years. It was at least 18 months it took to get done, just because there's one particular guy in the office. Basically, he wanted
he knows somebody, yeah,
and
yeah.
he wanted his friend to move into the apartment, and so he was like doing.
But this is also just, you know, clearly a sign. But I think that's an issue in a lot of countries, that there's just not enough social or affordable housing. You know, so it's something that a lot of people try to get, and so therefore it is something that can be used, you know, and I mean that's the basis of, you know, clientelism or patronage. You know, you can do a favor for somebody, you know, and I think that might be an issue in many places, but at the same time, it didn't happen, right? And if it did happen, you would have a recourse, right? And you would trust that system. And the guy, you know, if he was messing around, would be held accountable.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was getting to.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
As much as he was doing all of that, I realized if I was in the same or similar situation in Bosnia, for example, I probably would have lost the apartment. Because at least in my situation here, I was like, okay, this guy's really messing me around. I just kind of went above his head and spoke to somebody else, and I told them the situation, and then they kind of came down on him, and he like called me, and he was like all apologetic and whatever. Whereas I feel like if I was in a similar situation in Bosnia, that I wouldn't have had as many things to protect me in that situation. Yeah.
No, I mean, no. I guess, I mean, neither in theory or in practice. I mean, in theory, maybe, but you would just probably not have the heart or the energy to even try, because you would feel so sort of pessimistic from the start or dejected about it. Yeah. And that's I you know, that was one of the worst aspects of living for a long time in that country was seeing people lose their faith in the ability of the system to work for them. And then either just decide to give up entirely and, I don't know, I mean, live with the family, I guess, you know, or leave. And that's obviously bodes very badly for the future of any society, if you know, a really significant percentage of people are giving up or leaving.
Yeah, from the stats I've been looking at, I think it rises every year, the amount of people that leave. Like, right? And I don't know, it's kind of it's sad. I don't know. There's nothing else I can really say about it. But
It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense because there's so much possibility,
Yeah.
and it's such a beautiful place with yeah, so much possibility, and I mean economically, of course, but it's just culturally, in terms of resources, nature, and everything. Not to mention, um, you know, rich history and beautiful towns. I don't know. Doesn't make sense. And we know what it all comes down to is bad governance, bad management. And after, well, 30, 25, 30 years of that, then you look and you see it's the same people still running it. At some point, there should be a shareholder meeting who says, we're going to try a new direction. Bring in maybe some fresh talent here.
Yeah. How much of the language did you pick up while you were in Bosnia?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know percentage wise how much of it I picked up, but I definitely had to learn fast. I mean, I was having to work on highly political issues, but I had no. We're a small office, small organization, so I didn't have. I had my assistant who would interpret for me in meetings, but otherwise I didn't have advisors or people to do briefings for me, etc. So I decided very quickly that if I wanted to do my job the way I thought I should do it, I had to learn and study and know what's going on, not just wait for the Bosnia Daily to tell me. So yeah, I mean I was definitely rarely using interpretation. I very rarely would officially speak in Bosnia because I didn't want to take any chances of me saying things wrong. But I didn't need to listen to the interpretation, and in social situations I was pretty fine. But so yeah, I was reading a lot of newspapers and spending a lot of time in the city. So
like in social situations,
as much of time in cafes as I possibly could afford. That's one of my favorite things in the whole entire world, is to sit in a cafe in Sarajevo and read newspapers and drink coffee and watch people.
So in social situations, would you say that you can more or less speak about whatever kind of topic you want in Bosnia?
Yeah, I mean, it's harder right now, honestly, because I haven't been, but I do have a once a week, like a 1 hour class that I'm still doing. And the teacher is nice because she's really teaching me srpski jezik, but she's really nice, and she'll be like, oh, okay, but Marianne, yes, that would be rješenje, or milijek, and I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because that's which is point remind me, because obviously I spend time in Croatia and Serbia as well, and so I just kind of whichever word comes to me, I'll just use it. If it was Serbia, like, so yeah. But I remember being in a few situations, like for example, I remember being in Zagreb, and I was sitting down with somebody else. Oh, let's practice Croatian. I'm like, okay, let's go for it. So we're talking, and I don't know, maybe like 7 minutes in, she's just not responding. So what's going on? It's like my pronunciation really bad. Is what's happening? She said, no, I understood everything you said. I said, so what's the problem? I said, oh, you said you wanted to practice Croatian. I said, yeah, I'm trying. So yeah, but for the last like 4 or 5 minutes, you've been speaking Serbian. I don't want to speak Serbian. Like, let's, we either speak Croatian or let's just speak English. So I was like, all right, let's speak English then.
Okay. No, that would be too hard, honestly, if you have to think all the time. I mean, for us as foreigners and especially me as an adult learner of this language, if you have to think all the time, like, whoa, am I saying that in a Serbian way, a Croatian way, a Bosnian way, I would not be able to get a whole sentence out.
No, exactly. I don't know, like during the pandemic, I've really made an effort to really really like study it, because I don't know, I just pick things up along the way, like passively, and there are moments where I can appear to be completely fluent, like people, but it's usually because I'm under pressure. Like the person doesn't speak any English or little English. I remember being in a cabin in Novi Sad, and I'm driving, and the cab driver was asking me something, and I'm like trying to say, and he's like, but he just keeps going. So I'm like, okay, he really wants to have a conversation. So I'm just sitting there and I'm looking at him, and he asks me again, and I kind of just went for it without trying to think too hard. I'm just gonna say something. And he's like, and he replied, I'm like, okay, he understands me. And I find the situations like that. I can speak without.
Yeah. As I said, because I didn't have staff. So, and I wanted to know, so I went to a lot of meetings with community organizers, with and I had to understand them, which is obviously easier to understand than to speak. And I had to do it because I didn't have somebody all the time with me to interpret or translate for me. So I find that people are extremely kind about letting you try to speak to them in their language poorly. And that's really great. That's really great, because then you could just have the courage to keep going. So sometimes it might be hilarious, but at least you get somewhere eventually.
I find especially people very accommodating. You're just kind of making the effort, and most of the time I'm using the wrong pardage and whatever. People are like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Where in England, we're not so much like that, which is weird because English is so widely spoken. I don't know, but anyway, that's a whole nother. That
is a whole nother issue. I always, when people give people a hard time for speaking language X, again, my reaction is always like, if they're having a hard time speaking your languages, because they speak other languages. And Anglophone people are not the champions, let's say, of speaking other languages. So
I gotta get positive now, because my mother spoke 7 languages. And
wow.
So I'm like, I gotta get this one someplace. I have one that she didn't know.
Well, this is and I hate the idea for me that I put in so much effort to learn the language, and then I'm terrified of just having it disappear from my brain. So that's why I keep doing the lessons. One of the other problems I have is that because I studied Russian in university. So if I'm getting more and more these days, I seem to be more exposed to Russian, and the Russian and the what I call domache don't really sit well together in my brain at all. So I have to keep doing the lessons, otherwise I will just end up reverting to Russian in my head, and then not so good.
The language is from my brain. Like your brain is one. Like I'm really sad. That's what happened with me with Gaelic, because I spoke Gaelic like maybe not 100% fluent, like 90% to fluency, and it was while I was in school there. Because while I was in school in Ireland, basically it was all Irish born students had to learn it, and everybody else was like an option. And I thought, well, I'm here, why not? I might as well
Yeah.
learn it.
Where were you living?
In County Kildare.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was in a boarding
Just
school
outside
there,
Dublin,
which
but
yeah,
still.
like the boarding school now is, I think it's a 4-star hotel now. I think 4 or 5
Okay.
star. But yeah, I just remember learning that. I was really excited because I had this language, and I moved back to London, and I was like, who am I gonna speak to? Who am I gonna speak to in Gaelic? And like I would say, after about 5 or 6 years, it kind of just vanished. Like
Hmm.
there's a couple of books I have where I can pick it up and understand bits and pieces, but and if you ask me to say something now, it's just gone. And I'm like,
Well, if you could try to get, I think it's RTE4, the whole channel in Irish.
yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
If I don't know if you can get it there, but sometimes when I'm in Ireland, sometimes I just watch it. I have no clue, but I'm just, just fascinated by, a soap opera, for example, where it's like a whole village and they're all like I've never seen that village where everybody's speaking Irish all the time. Um, but it's cool. I like the way it sounds. I really can just pick out occasional words. I have no clue, but I speak Bosnian much better than
Much better.
Irish.
Yeah, because even when I was in Ireland, I found there were like outside of my school and a couple of the other private schools in my area, like even young people, a lot of young people didn't speak it. I didn't even like it was mostly like smaller towns, and older
In the
people.
West Coast, yeah.
Yeah, that was more or less it.
No, I think they just did it for school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But then again, there are sort of revivals and, you know, some communities, people that take it more seriously. And it's all part of a real multicultural society, right?
Oh, well, let me not take up too much of your time. In closing,
Mhm.
um, where can people follow your work, and is there anything that you're working on that we should look out for?
Well, I would really recommend anybody have a look at the World Forum for Democracy. It's on the Council of Europe's main website, www.coe.int, under democracy. You'll find the World Forum for Democracy. And again, last year was really fantastic. We focused on the environment in democracy. This year, we're going to be focusing on, we haven't finalized the topic or certainly not the title, but we are going to be focusing on divided societies and polarization and how to overcome polarization and to bring democracy back alive in the world, really. So I expect and I hope that we'll have a lot of speakers and examples from the Balkans, and not just about post-conflict reconciliation type of stuff. That's not it. What we really need to talk about is how to, in all of our societies, rebuild the fundamental connection between us as citizens. Because if we are, whether for religious, language, ethnic, or purely ideological reasons, going to increasingly point out different groups of people as enemies, others, not patriotic, or not from here, not, whatever the thing is going to be. It's just a road that doesn't lead anywhere good. And the fun, the basic, we say government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's what democracy, is at its sort of simplest form. If we don't see each other as part of the same group of citizens, that, then what's the point, right? What's the point of a country if it's not welcoming all of the people inside as part of a collective group of something in common, right? So I think it's really an existential moment that we're facing for democracy, but I mean, ultimately for, whether we are going to continue with the general post-World War II trend of increasing quality of life, increasing freedom, increasing security, safety, and increasing equality of opportunities, or are we heading for, I don't want to be melodramatic, but off a cliff, basically. So yeah, I think it's really, really important. And that's going to be happening between the 7th and the 9th of November, 2022. In the meantime, we will be publishing probably in the next 3 to 5 weeks a call for initiatives, which will be a call for anybody working on a grassroots level or with NGOs or with public sector, private sector on doing some kind of work to foster improved community relations, democratic participation, overcoming polarizations. I mean, or whether it be getting anti-vaxxers and vaxxers to speak to each other and come to common understanding about something, or whatever the issue you might imagine. We want those people to send in an application to be a part of the World Forum, and eventually for a certain number of these initiatives or efforts that they're doing to be presented to the whole of the World Forum and discussed as part of a solution.
Super. Well,
so the Council of Europe's website, you can find everything.
Super. Well, appreciate your time. Thank you for your time.
It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, it was definitely a great conversation.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll go on a coffee in Sarajevo sometime.
Naravno, nadam se uskoro. Yeah.
Cheers.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick.
Why fight? Let's unite, let's see your true colours. Whether it's dark or light, let's see your true colours. The black and white.